The champagne flute slipped through Derek Morrison's fingers when he saw the woman on stage. For a brutal, impossible moment, his brain refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Catherine. His Catherine. There, under the spotlights of the grand ballroom at the Four Seasons in Chicago, wearing a navy blue silk dress he'd never seen, smiling at an audience of 300 people as if she belonged there, as if she were exactly who she was always meant to be. The crystal shattered against the Italian marble, but the sound was swallowed by the music and the buzz of Chicago's elite celebrating the inauguration of the new Center for Contemporary Arts. Derek felt the cold liquid soak his $3,000 Italian shoes, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the stage. And it is with immense pleasure that I present to you the largest individual patron of this project, the visionary behind the cultural transformation our city so desperately needed. The master of ceremonies' voice echoed through the ballroom as Catherine waved with rehearsed grace, as if she had been born for that moment. Derek had arrived at the gala 40 minutes ago, alone as always, greeting business partners with his luxury real estate agent's smile. He'd stopped for 3 selfies with influencers who frequented his open houses, joked about being available when asked about his personal life, and posted an elegant photo on his Instagram with the caption, "Nights like this make Chicago shine." 23,000 likes in 15 minutes. Now that carefully constructed world was crumbling around him like a house of cards in slow motion. The woman beside him, Vanessa Chen, a tech developer who had invested in 2 of his most lucrative projects, touched his arm. "Derek, are you all right? You've gone pale." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. On stage, Catherine was being led to the center by 2 reporters he immediately recognized, Marcus Riley from the Chicago Tribune and Samantha Voss, host of the Midwest's most watched morning show. Catherine Brennan has completely revolutionized the independent art gallery scene over the past 5 years, Samantha was saying, her microphone picking up every word while cameras flashed like furious stars. Her network of 23 galleries across 17 states has transformed unknown artists into nationally recognized names. And now, with this $8 million donation to the Arts Center, she is quite literally shaping Chicago's cultural future. $8 million. Derek felt the floor sway beneath his feet. He knew Catherine worked with art. Of course he did. She spent her days in her basement office at their Evanston home, taking calls, organizing catalogs, doing those things he'd never bothered to ask much about. Art was a hobby, a way for her to keep busy while he built a real estate empire. At least, that's what he was sure of. Keeps the wife at home, does it, Derek? Chad Whitmore, his fellow agent, appeared beside him with a glass of whiskey and that smug grin. Smart woman. No social media drama. No showing up drunk at parties. You hit the jackpot staying single and free. Derek had told that story so many times he almost believed it himself. 7 years ago, when he married Catherine in a discreet ceremony at a Milwaukee courthouse, he had just closed his first big deal. He was building his personal brand, and his mentor, legendary broker Gerald Hastings, had been clear. Married men sell houses, single men sell lifestyles, and lifestyle is what drives luxury real estate. Catherine was only 22 then, a recent art history graduate, working as an assistant at an obscure gallery. She had brown eyes that seemed to hold secrets, and a quiet demeanor that made him feel important. He loved her, in an abstract way that never bothered him much. And when he explained that he needed to keep their marriage private for professional reasons, just for a few years, just until he established himself, she had agreed with that soft smile he interpreted as complacency. Just for a while, he had promised. "When I get where I need to be, we'll announce everything." But 1 year turned into 2, 2 into 5, and somehow it never seemed like the right time. His brand had become synonymous with sophisticated bachelorhood. His sales doubled every year. And Catherine never complained. She was always home when he returned, always had dinner ready, always smiled when he canceled yet another anniversary dinner because an important client was in town. On stage, Catherine was answering a question from Marcus. "I built it all myself, starting with a small inheritance from my grandmother. $15,000. I invested in the first artist I truly believed in, an incredible painter named Zara Chen from Seattle. And from there it was a matter of trusting my vision and working 18 hours a day. Her voice was different, firmer, more confident. Derek realized with a shock that he rarely heard her speak for more than a few minutes straight at home. Their conversations were functional, superficial. How was her day? What they wanted for dinner? If she could pick up his dry cleaning. And what about your personal life? Samantha leaned in with that cultivated interest of experienced journalists. Such a successful, beautiful woman. Is there anyone special? The entire ballroom seemed to have fallen silent. Or perhaps it was just the blood thundering in Derek's ears. He watched Catherine smile, that same soft smile he knew so well. But there was something different about it now, something sharp at the edges. "What an interesting question," Catherine said, her voice floating through the sound system like silk over glass. "Let me answer it this way. For 7 years, I built an empire while living in the shadows of someone who was ashamed of my existence. And today, finally, I am stepping out of those shadows." The murmur that swept through the ballroom was almost physical. Phone cameras began to rise like an instant forest. Derek felt Vanessa's gaze burning the side of his face. "That sounds like a fascinating story," Marcus pressed, clearly smelling a journalistic scoop. "Can you elaborate?" Catherine looked directly into the crowd, and Derek had the utterly irrational feeling that she knew exactly where he was, that her eyes found him in the elegant dimness of the ballroom, pinpointed him among the curious faces and champagne flutes, and pinned him like a butterfly to a board. "Some stories," she said softly, "are best told in their own time. But let's just say that tonight marks the beginning of a new era of transparency in my life. No more living hidden. No more being anyone's secret." Derek's phone began to vibrate in his pocket. Once, twice, 5 times, 10. He ignored it, unable to move, unable to breathe properly, as he watched his wife transform into an instant celebrity before his eyes. The camera flashes created a constellation around her, and Catherine shone in the center like a star he had never truly seen before. Vanessa subtly moved away from him, only a few inches, but Derek noticed. Around him, people began to whisper, heads coming together, phones being checked. Social media worked faster than conscious thought. Someone had already made the connection. Someone always did. His own phone kept vibrating nonstop. Notifications, messages. The digital world waking up to the fact that Derek Morrison, Chicago's most coveted real estate bachelor, the man who had built an entire brand on being available and free, was a liar. The men's room at the Four Seasons was all travertine marble and dark wood, a sanctuary of refined masculinity where powerful men recomposed themselves before returning to the social battlefield. Derek pushed the door hard enough to slam it against the wall, but the designer hydraulic damper absorbed the impact, transforming his rage into a pathetic whisper. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the sink. In the imported Venetian mirror, a stranger stared back at him, red-faced, tie crooked, a champagne stain on the lapel of his $5,000 tuxedo. This wasn't Derek Morrison, the man whose photo appeared on the cover of Chicago Business Magazine as one of the 40 under 40. This was an imposter crumbling in real time. The phone didn't stop. He tore it from his pocket and watched the notifications explode on the screen like malignant fireworks. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, text messages from numbers he didn't even recognize. His Instagram feed, carefully curated with photos of luxury properties and calculated moments from his single lifestyle, was being invaded by comments that felt like stabs. Always knew this guy was fake. "Imagine hiding your wife for 7 years. What a psychopath. Catherine Brennan is an icon for exposing this trash." Derek's trembling fingers swiped to Catherine's profile. Except it wasn't the private profile with 3 blurry photos he'd last seen months ago when he'd idly checked to ensure she was still being discreet. The profile was now public, with a blue verification badge next to her name, and 400,000 followers. 400,000. He had 23,000 and had worked years for every single one. Her profile picture showed Catherine in a gallery he didn't recognize, standing next to a modern abstract sculpture, wearing a grey tailored suit that accentuated angles on her body. He didn't remember noticing. She was looking at the camera with serene confidence, as if she had always known this moment would come, as if she had planned it all. The bathroom door opened. Derek looked up and saw Marcus Riley, the Tribune reporter, standing in the doorway with an expression that blended professional curiosity and something dangerously close to sympathy. "Mr. Morrison, I thought I might find you here." Derek straightened up automatically, his years of sales training taking over, even as his world crumbled. "I have no comment for the press. Not even about the fact that your wife of 7 years just became the most talked about woman in Chicago?" Marcus took a few steps inside, letting the door close softly behind him. "Because I have to admit, Morrison, this is a fascinating story. The city's most famous bachelor real estate agent secretly married to an art magnate. It's almost Shakespearean. Get your facts straight." Derek forced firmness into his voice. "My personal life is none of your business. It was only your personal life when it was secret." Marcus leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "Now it's public interest. You built an entire career on a lie. How many women did you publicly date while you had a wife at home? How many clients trusted you based on a persona that never existed?" The accusation hit Derek like a physical blow because he knew, somewhere deep and nauseating, that Marcus was right. There was Melissa, the architect he had taken to 3 charity events. Jennifer, the corporate lawyer with whom he had appeared in photos at River North's most exclusive rooftop bar. Amber, the personal trainer who posted selfies of them after morning workouts, hinting at something Derek never confirmed or denied. No relationship had gone beyond a few calculated kisses, a few strategic dinners. But he had allowed the world to believe. He had cultivated the image of an available playboy because Gerald Hastings had been right about one thing. Sex sold apartments. And an attractive single man selling the dream of a glamorous Chicago life sold very, very well. "You don't understand." Derek heard the desperation in his own voice and hated it. It was a career choice. Catherine agreed. She knew. Catherine knew you'd hide her like a dirty secret for 7 years. Marcus raised an eyebrow. She knew you'd deny her existence while building an empire based on being the eternal bachelor. Because from the stage tonight, it didn't sound like she was very happy with that arrangement. Before Derek could respond, his phone rang. Gerald Hastings, his mentor. The man who had transformed him from a mediocre agent into a luxury brand. Derek considered not answering, but old habits were hard to break. He answered. "You need to control this situation, now." Gerald's voice was glacial. "I just got calls from 6 clients wanting to cancel contracts. 6, Derek, in 20 minutes. Social media is destroying us. I know, You don't know anything." Gerald cut him off, and Derek could imagine him in his Loop office, watching the disaster unfold on multiple screens. "I just saw a video of your wife I didn't even know existed, being interviewed by NBC News. By NBC, Derek. She's telling reporters how she built an $80 million empire while her husband kept her hidden. Do you have any idea what that does to our brand? 80 million. The number ricocheted through Derek's skull like a stray bullet. He was sure Catherine had some success with her galleries, but 80 million? That was more than he had made in his entire career. Far more. "Gerald, I can explain." "Not to me, to them." Derek could hear voices in the background, tense and urgent. "I'm already with our PR team. You have 2 options. Control this narrative immediately, or you're out of the company. And when I say out, I mean without your clients, without your portfolio, without anything but the clothes on your back." The call died. Derek stared at the phone, feeling reality compress his chest like a vice. Everything he had worked for, every sacrifice he had made, every corner he had cut, was evaporating in real time. "Problem?" Marcus asked, and there was a glint in his eyes that Derek recognized. It was the look of a journalist who knew he was sitting on a story that would make headlines for weeks. Derek ignored him and opened Twitter. The hashtag to Catherine Brennan was trending in the United States. Number 3, above political scandals and movie stars. There were clips of her interview being shared thousands of times, each retweet adding another brick to the mausoleum of his reputation. One particular video had 500,000 views. It was Catherine on stage, answering a question from Samantha about how she had achieved so much success while remaining so private. Her answer cut like glass. "Privacy is a choice. Invisibility is a prison. I've been in prison long enough." The comments were relentless. Queen, feminist icon. She didn't need him for anything. And then, inevitably, someone had found old photos of him with other women. There was an entire thread dissecting every public appearance he had made, every calculated insinuation of availability, every rehearsed smile for cameras while his wife was presumably at home, alone. The door opened again. Vanessa Chen entered, her heels echoing on the marble. She looked at Marcus, then at Derek, and something in her expression made his stomach sink even further. "I need to speak with you." Her voice was too professional, too careful. In private, Marcus raised his hands in mock surrender. "I'll be out there. Derek, you'll want to talk to me eventually. Better it be before someone else tells your version of the story." He exited, leaving Derek alone with Vanessa. She wasted no time. "The 2 projects I have with you, I'm pulling out." "Vanessa, wait! I can't have my brand associated with this." She gestured vaguely in his direction as if he were a car crash she needed to look away from. "I have investors who care about optics. And the optics here are terrible, Derek. You lied. To everyone. For years." It was complicated, Derek tried, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. It wasn't complicated. It was cowardly. Vanessa adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "You know what's saddest. Catherine Brennan seems to be exactly the kind of woman who would have boosted your career if you'd had the courage to stand by her. But you chose the easy version. The lie. And now you're going to pay for it." She left before Derek could form a reply, and the silence of the marble bathroom became deafening. He stood there, alone with his reflection and the crushing weight of his choices, while the world outside continued to spin without him. His phone vibrated again. A text message from an unknown number. "You deserve everything that's happening. Melissa." The architect. One of several women he had used as props for his elaborate charade. Derek deleted the message, but 3 more arrived before he could put the phone away. When he finally mustered the courage to leave the bathroom, the ballroom was transformed. Groups of people huddled in conspiratorial circles, all with phones in hand, clearly discussing the scandal unfolding in real time. Derek felt all eyes turn his way as he crossed the space, that characteristic silence that precedes collective judgment. Catherine was no longer on stage. He located her near the main entrance, surrounded by a group of people Derek recognized as important figures in Chicago's art scene. She laughed at something someone had said, her head slightly tilted, and that simple gesture pierced Derek with unexpected nostalgia. He knew that laugh. Or at least he had once, in another life, when he still paid attention to such things. She was wearing pearl earrings he'd never seen before. Her brown hair was swept into an elegant chignon that exposed the graceful curve of her neck. When was the last time he had truly looked at her? Not just seen, but truly observed. Derek realized with growing horror that he couldn't remember. He started to move towards her, with no real plan beyond an urgent need to talk to her, to understand how everything had reached this point. But before he could cross half the ballroom, a firm hand gripped his arm. Not a good idea. Chad Whitmore was beside him, but the earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by something that seemed genuinely concerned. Cameras are everywhere. Anything you do now will go viral in minutes. Derek shook his arm free. I need to talk to her. No, you need a lawyer and a PR team. Chad lowered his voice. Look, I know I've always been a jerk to you, but this is different. You're bleeding out on social media. With every passing minute, your career is dying a little more. Talking to your wife publicly now won't help. It'll just give them more ammunition. As if to prove Chad's point, a flash exploded near them. Derek turned and saw 3 people with professional cameras, press credentials hanging around their necks, clearly documenting his every move. One of them, a young photographer with a gigantic Canon camera, smiled when their eyes met, as if he knew exactly what he was capturing, a man collapsing in high definition. Derek instinctively recoiled, and that was a mistake. The hesitation registered on the cameras, in the body language of the people around him. He saw it in their faces: coward, liar, a man who couldn't even face the consequences of his own actions. His phone rang again. This time it was Amanda Roche, his best agent, the woman who managed half of his client portfolio. He answered, turning to the wall in a futile attempt at privacy. Derek, where are you? Her voice was tense, lacking its usual professional warmth. At the Four Seasons. Amanda, I can explain, not over the phone, not now. He heard her take a deep breath. The Pattersons canceled. The Chens too. The Rodriguez family wants a different agent for their Gold Coast property. That's just in the last half hour. Derek closed his eyes, feeling the world tilt beneath his feet. The Pattersons alone represented a commission of $250,000. How much? If we keep losing clients at this rate, you're looking at losses in the millions. A pause. Derek, Gerald is talking about cutting you off from the company. Completely. He thinks you're toxic now. The word hung between them. Toxic. Derek Morrison, who had built his reputation on charm and reliability, was now radioactive. People didn't just want distance from him. They wanted the world to know they had distance from him. I need time, Derek said, hating the desperation in his voice. Just give me until tomorrow. I'll fix this. How? Amanda wasn't being cruel, just factual. Derek, your wife is an instant celebrity. People love her, and they hate you. There's no PR in the world that can spin lying about being married for 7 years into something palatable. She was right, and they both knew it. Derek mumbled something about calling her back and hung up before she could reply. When he turned, Chad had vanished, likely distancing himself from the epicenter of the disaster. Smart move. Derek looked for Catherine again in the ballroom and found her being guided to another interview, this time with a reporter he recognized from a national evening program. She waved to someone in the crowd, and Derek followed the gesture to a tall woman with silver hair wearing a dramatic red dress. There was something in the way Catherine smiled at her, intimate and conspiratorial, that made Derek realize how many secrets his wife kept from him, how many friendships, how many connections, how many entire parts of her life existed outside the small universe he had allowed her to inhabit in his consciousness. His phone exploded with a new wave of notifications. Someone had found photos of their wedding. Derek felt his stomach drop when he opened the Twitter link and saw the blurry image of him and Catherine at the Milwaukee courthouse, both so young, they looked like children playing at being adults. Catherine wore a simple white dress she had probably bought at a department store. He was in a suit, that cheap gray one that had been the best he could afford at the time. They were smiling in the photo. Truly smiling, with that unguarded joy of people who still believe that love conquers all. Derek remembered that day with a clarity that surprised him. Catherine had tripped on the courthouse stairs because of her new shoes, and he had caught her, and she had laughed against his chest, and for a crystalline moment he had thought, I am the luckiest man in the world. When had he stopped thinking that way? When had she become just part of the furniture of his life, as present and ignored as the sofa in the living room or the painting on the wall? The answer came with an uncomfortable brutality. Gradually, Then suddenly, like all great betrayals, one day she was the woman he loved. The next, she was an inconvenience to the image he was building. And then, without him quite realizing when the transformation was complete, she was no one. Or worse, she was something to be hidden, to be ashamed of, to be denied. Derek exited the main ballroom into the quiet corridor leading to the elevators. He needed to get out, regroup, think. But when he reached the elevators, he found Marcus Riley waiting, as if he knew exactly where Derek would go. Ready to talk? The reporter didn't seem triumphant, just weary, like someone who had seen many versions of this story and knew exactly how it would end. "What do you want to know?" Derek asked, and his voice sounded defeated, even to his own ears. "The truth. For a change." Marcus gestured to a small adjacent lounge, empty at this hour. "Give me 15 minutes. Tell your side. It's your only chance to control any part of this narrative before it swallows you whole." Derek should refuse. He should call a lawyer, follow corporate protocol, let PR professionals craft careful, empty responses. But looking at Marcus, at the hotel's quiet, elegant corridor, at his own life exploding in slow motion, he realized it didn't matter. The damage was done. The truth was already out there, raw and ugly and undeniable. They sat in leather armchairs that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Marcus pulled a small recorder from his pocket, pressed record, and waited. "I loved her," Derek began, and realized he had used the past tense. Loved. As if that feeling were something mummified, preserved in amber, belonging to a version of him that no longer existed. "When we got married, I really did love her. But not enough to admit it publicly. It's not that simple." Derek rubbed his face, feeling the exhaustion of 7 years of lies weigh on him. "I was building something, a brand, a reputation. And my mentor, the man who taught me everything about this business, told me that marriage was death for a young agent trying to make a name in the luxury market. So you chose your career over your wife. I chose both. Or I thought I had." Derek heard the defensiveness in his voice and hated it. Catherine agreed. She said she understood, that she would wait until I was established. Marcus leaned forward. 7 years is a long time to wait in the shadows. I know that now. The words came out raw, scraping Derek's throat. But at the time, it made sense. Just 1 more year, I thought. Just until the next big deal. Until I landed that important client. Until... He trailed off, unable to complete the sentence because there was no honest ending to it. "Until what, Derek?" "Until never." The admission emerged as a whisper. "The truth is, I wasn't going to tell. Never. Because the lie was working too well for me." In the main ballroom, he could hear music restarting, the buzz of conversations returning to normal. Life went on for everyone but him. Derek thought of Catherine inside, shining under spotlights she had built for herself, without him, despite him. And he realized finally, what should have been obvious from the start. She had never needed him to be extraordinary. She just needed him to get out of the way. The interview with Marcus ended at 11:43 p.m., but Derek knew that the words he had spoken would continue to reverberate for days, perhaps weeks. The reporter turned off the recorder with a soft click that sounded too definitive, too final, like a door closing in a dead-end corridor. "Thank you for your honesty," Marcus said, putting away his equipment. "I know that wasn't easy." Derek didn't reply. Honesty felt like an obscene word coming from his mouth now, after years of weaving an elaborate tapestry of half-truths and calculated omissions. He watched Marcus leave the lounge, likely already mentally drafting the story that would be published the next morning, dissecting the remnants of Derek's life with the clinical precision of a surgeon. The main ballroom had emptied considerably. It was almost midnight, and most guests had migrated to after-parties in private apartments or exclusive bars in River North. Derek stood at the entrance, watching hotel staff begin to clean up, collecting abandoned champagne flutes and crumpled napkins. erasing physical evidence of a night that would live forever in digital memory. Catherine was still there. He saw her near the panoramic windows overlooking Lakeshore Drive, the illuminated city stretching behind her like a diamond necklace. She was talking with the silver-haired woman Derek had noticed earlier, their heads close, intimate. When Catherine laughed, the sound carried across the almost empty ballroom, and Derek felt that nostalgia again, sharper now, cutting through the fog of shock and denial that had enveloped him for the past few hours. He crossed the ballroom towards her. This time, there was no Chad to stop him, no photographer in sight to turn the moment into a headline. Just the silent space between him and the woman who had been his wife for 7 years, but whom he was beginning to realize he had never truly known. Catherine saw him coming. Something flickered across her face, too quickly for Derek to interpret. It wasn't fear or anger. Perhaps it was just weariness. She said something to the woman beside her, who looked at Derek with an expression he recognized immediately. Polite disdain, the kind reserved for particularly persistent insects at social events. Derek. Catherine's voice was neutral, controlled. She didn't smile. Took you long enough? We need to talk. The words came out harsher than he intended. Now you want to talk. Catherine tilted her head, a gesture he remembered from 1,000 small domestic moments, but which felt different here, beneath the crystal chandeliers, with the entire city watching through screens and shares. How convenient. The silver-haired woman touched Catherine's arm. Do you want me to stay? No. Thank you, Diana. Catherine squeezed her friend's hand. I'll meet you at the car in 15 minutes. Diana cast one last warning glance at Derek before leaving, her heels echoing on the marble like small accusations. Then Derek and Catherine were alone, or as close to alone as was possible when 3 hotel staff members pretended not to hear them from across the ballroom. Catherine, Derek stopped, realizing he had no idea what to say. I'm sorry, felt insufficient to the point of ridiculousness. I can explain, was obviously a lie. I love you, was stuck somewhere between his throat and his heart, unable to emerge because he wasn't sure if it was true or just panic. You what? Catherine crossed her arms, and Derek noticed she had taken off her high heels. She was barefoot on the cold marble floor, and this human detail, this small concession to discomfort, hit him harder than any of the accusations he had read online. Are you going to tell me it was all a big misunderstanding? That you were just about to introduce me to the world? That you just needed a few more months? No. The word came out like a surrender. I won't say any of that. That seemed to surprise her. Her eyebrows raised slightly, and she uncrossed her arms. Then what are you going to say? Derek looked at the woman in front of him, really looked for the first time in years. There were fine lines around her eyes that he didn't remember, expression marks that spoke of smiles and worries he had never witnessed. She had lost weight, or perhaps just changed, her body more defined, stronger. She wore a wedding ring, but it wasn't the simple gold band he had bought with his first salary 7 years ago. This one was different, more elaborate, with small inlaid diamonds. He wondered when she had changed it, and why he had never noticed. You built an empire, he finally said. $80 million, 23 galleries, and I knew nothing about it. You never asked. Catherine didn't say it with anger, just as a fact. Every day when you came home, I waited for you to ask about my day, about what I was working on. And every day you talked about your business, your clients, your achievements. And I listened. Always listened. The accusation was soft, but it cut Derek more deeply than if she had screamed, because it was true. He remembered the evenings, coming home after showing properties, finding Catherine in the kitchen or the office, and launching into monologues about his journey. She always asked the right questions, offered the appropriate reactions, and he had interpreted that as genuine interest, perhaps even admiration, when in fact it was just her filling the silence that he never allowed her to break with her own stories. When did you decide to do this? Derek asked. Tonight. All this public exposure. Was it planned? Catherine walked to the windows, looking at the city spread out below them. I planned it for 18 months. From the moment I realized you were never going to give me permission to exist publicly, so I would have to take that permission back for myself. 18 months. Derek processed the number. What happened 18 months ago? Do you remember the Riverside Tower launch party? Catherine didn't look at him, keeping her eyes on the city. You took that lawyer, Jennifer Choi. There were photos of the two of you everywhere on social media. You with your arm around her, smiling as if you were a couple. Derek remembered. It was an important event, and Gerald had insisted he show up with someone impressive. Jennifer was smart, attractive, well-connected. She had agreed to be his +1, understanding it was purely professional. Or at least Derek had thought she understood. I saw the pictures, Catherine continued, her voice still calm, but Derek could hear something breaking at the edges. And I thought, my husband is building an entire life without me, not just hiding our marriage, but actively pretending I don't exist, building a complete persona based on my non-existence. Catherine, Did I sleep with them? Catherine finally turned to face him. I know. You were always careful, always keeping it to suggestions, implications, never anything definitive enough to truly commit. But you know what's worse than infidelity? Erasure. You erased me, Derek, as if I were a draft you had decided didn't fit into the final version of your story. The words hung between them, heavy and inescapable. Derek wanted to deny it, wanted to find some way to reframe his actions as something less monstrous, but the truth was crystal clear and brutal. She was right. He had done exactly that. So you built all this as revenge. He heard the bitterness in his own voice and immediately regretted it. Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Do you really think I built an $80 million business as revenge against you? Derek, you are not the center of the universe, though I'm sure you were the center of mine. Then why? Why now? Why like this? Because I was ready. Catherine crossed her arms again, not defensively, but as if embracing herself. When I started 7 years ago, I was just a 22-year-old girl with a degree in art history and a small inheritance. I had no confidence, I had no network, I had nothing but a vision that marginalized artists deserved better platforms. Derek watched her as she spoke, seeing the transformation in real time. This was not the quiet woman who cooked dinner and asked about his day. This was someone who had built something extraordinary from nothing, who had made difficult choices and risked everything on her own vision. In the early years, I failed. A lot. Catherine laughed, but there was a harsh quality to it. My first gallery in Milwaukee closed in 6 months. I lost half of my grandmother's inheritance, but I learned. And I tried again. And I failed again. And I learned more. You never told me about any of that, Derek said, and realized as the words came out how accusatory they sounded when he had no right to accuse. You were busy building your brand, Catherine replied simply. And I found there was something liberating about doing it on my own, without your approval, without your judgment, without having to worry if my success or failure would reflect on you in any way. Derek felt the ground sway again beneath his feet, that nauseating sensation of his world rearranging itself into patterns he didn't recognize. So our entire marriage was just, what? A facade? For you? Yes. Catherine didn't hesitate, and the speed of her reply hurt more than the answer itself. For me? It was a prison I chose, hoping that one day you would open the door, but you never did, so I found my own way out. One of the hotel staff members approached discreetly. Pardon me for interrupting, but we're closing the ballroom. Catherine nodded in acknowledgement. I'm going. She looked for her shoes, finding them where she had left them near a marble column. As she bent to slip them on, Derek saw the curve of her spine, the momentary vulnerability of someone balancing on one foot, and felt a sudden urge to reach out to her, to touch her, to do something, anything, to anchor this moment before she disappeared. "What happens now?" he asked as she straightened, now 2 inches taller in her heels. "Now?" Catherine adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "Now I'm going home. My real home, not that facade in Evanston you use as a backdrop for your invented life. I have a loft in West Loop that I bought 2 years ago. Diana is waiting for me so we can celebrate." 2 years? Derek felt the shock like an electric current. "You haven't lived in Evanston for 2 years. I stay there a few days a week. Enough to maintain the illusion that we're a normal couple who just values privacy." Catherine started walking towards the exit, and Derek followed her automatically. "But my real life, Derek, that happens in places you've never seen, with people you've never met." They reached the lobby, where Diana waited, along with a uniformed driver beside a sleek black SUV. Through the glass doors, Derek could see Michigan Avenue still bustling, even at this hour, the city pulsing with life that continued regardless of their small personal tragedies. "Catherine, wait." Derek touched her arm and she stopped, looking at his hand as if it were something strange, alien. He released her immediately. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but are you going to file for divorce?" The question hung between them. Derek realized he was holding his breath, waiting for her answer, though he wasn't sure which answer he was waiting for or which he truly wanted to hear. Catherine studied his face for a long moment. "You know what's interesting? All these years I thought I loved you, that I was waiting for the man who proposed to me in that ridiculously romantic coffee shop near DePaul University. Do you remember that day?" Derek remembered. It had been spring, and Catherine had hot chocolate with marshmallows, and he had knelt between the cramped tables while college students applauded. It felt like it belonged to another life, another version of them that had been swept away by time and bad choices. "But tonight," Catherine continued, "when I walked onto that stage and saw your face in the crowd, I realized something. I haven't loved you for a very long time. I loved the idea of you. The possibility that one day you would become the man I needed. But that day is never going to come, is it?" It wasn't really a question. "Catherine, my lawyer will be in touch." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back one last time. "And Derek, you should know that tonight wasn't about destroying you. It was about freeing myself. The fact that your reputation was damaged in the process is just a consequence of your own choices. You built a house of cards. I just opened a window." The Uber ride back to Evanston lasted 42 minutes, but for Derek, it could have been 42 years. He sat in the back of a Toyota Camry that smelled of cherry air freshener, watching the city blur past the window in streaks of neon light and concrete, while his phone vibrated incessantly in his pocket like a frantic heart. The driver, a middle-aged man with a Middle Eastern accent, tried to make conversation for the first 10 minutes, but gave up when Derek replied only with monosyllabic grunts. Now there was just the awkward silence of the car, punctuated by the radio station softly playing pop songs Derek didn't recognize, reminding him how disconnected he was from everything outside his carefully constructed and now completely shattered world. When he finally arrived at the house in Evanston, it was almost 2 a.m. The street was silent. The elegant Victorian houses sleeping beneath old elm trees that cast twisted shadows under the streetlights. Derek paid the driver through the app and stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, looking at the 3-story house he had bought 5 years ago as a smart investment in an up-and-coming neighborhood. It was an impressive property, he had to admit. Restored red brick, original wooden details, a front garden meticulously cared for by a landscaper who charged a fortune. Derek had posted photos of it on Instagram dozens of times, always from angles that showcased the architecture but never revealed much about who actually lived there. "My sanctuary," he had once captioned it, racking up thousands of likes from followers who imagined his solitary, sophisticated life in this beautiful, empty space. Except, it had never been empty. Catherine had lived here, cooked in this kitchen, slept in this bedroom. built her empire from the basement office Derek rarely visited, and he had treated all of it as scenery, as props for the elaborate production of his fake life. The front door lock resisted for a moment, and Derek felt an irrational flash of panic that Catherine had changed the locks, that he would be locked out of his own home. But then the key turned, the door opened, and he stepped into the heavy silence of a space that suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger. Derek turned on the lights and looked around the living room as if seeing it for the first time. The modern gray sofa he had chosen because it photographed well. The glass and steel coffee table that never accumulated clutter because he rarely used it. The minimalist shelves with books organized by color because an interior designer had said it was trending. Everything was beautiful and cold and utterly impersonal, like a boutique hotel where no one truly lived. But then he noticed the details he had ignored for years. A cream wool throw folded over the arm of the sofa, too soft and textured to be something he would have chosen. A small, abstract bronze sculpture on the bookshelf that he didn't remember buying, art books interspersed among the color-organized volumes, their titles in gold lettering, clearly read and loved. Catherine had left marks everywhere. He just had never paid enough attention to notice them. Derek climbed the stairs to the second floor, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The master bedroom was another space he had decorated with how it would photograph in mind, not how it would be lived in. King-sized bed with white sheets, minimalist nightstands, a reading armchair in the corner he had never used. He opened the closet and found his clothes hanging in meticulous order on the left, suits organized by color and occasion. On the right was Catherine's section, and Derek paused, truly looking at it for the first time in how long? Years, probably. There were far fewer clothes than he expected. Perhaps half the space was empty, bare hangers swaying softly with the movement of the air. She had taken things. Gradually, over months or years, she had moved her life to that loft in West Loop that he had never seen, never known, never cared to ask about. Derek touched one of the remaining dresses, a simple blue cotton one he vaguely remembered seeing her wear on weekends. The fabric was soft, worn from use, and he realized it was probably one of the few things she had kept here because she no longer cared about it. His phone vibrated again, pulling him from the spiral of thoughts. He pulled it from his pocket and saw 17 missed calls, 53 unread messages, and social media notifications that had topped 1,000. Derek scrolled through the digital chaos, watching his professional world crumble in real time. Gerald had sent a message at 11:57. "Emergency meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't be late." Amanda had tried to call 4 times, finally leaving a voicemail that Derek didn't have the courage to listen to. There were texts from clients, some polite, others brutally honest. "I'm not comfortable continuing our business partnership. You lied about who you are. How can I trust you to help me find a home? My wife insists we work with another broker. Sorry." But it was social media that truly showed the extent of the disaster. The hashtag about Catherine had now become globally trending. Number 1, with millions of tweets. There were memes, discussion threads, articles being published on major news sites. The story had transcended Chicago's social circle and become a cultural phenomenon, a case study on toxic masculinity, on women reclaiming their power, on the lies we build to protect our fragile egos. And Derek was at the center of it all, the perfect villain figure for the social media age. His picture was everywhere, usually those carefully curated selfies he had posted over the years, now being recontextualized and ridiculed. Someone had created a compilation of all the times he had been photographed with different women, juxtaposing them with photos of Catherine in her galleries, building her empire while he played the bachelor. While Derek Morrison was posting selfies at the rooftop bar, Catherine Brennan was signing 8-figure contracts. Imagine being so mediocre that you have to hide your extraordinary wife to feel special. Derek Morrison is proof that sometimes women are too good for the men they marry. Derek closed the app and opened his Instagram. His followers were dropping in real time, from 23,000 to 21,000, 20,000, 19,500. People were not just unfollowing him, but leaving venomous comments on his old photos, dissecting every image, every caption, looking for evidence of his duplicity. There was a photo of him at Navy Pier from last summer, smiling at the camera with Lake Michigan glittering behind him. The caption read, "Enjoying the freedom of a perfect Sunday." Now it had hundreds of comments. Freedom from what? Your wife? This guy is a classic narcissist. Hope Catherine takes him for everything in the divorce. Derek threw his phone onto the bed and went to the bathroom. His reflection in the mirror above the sink surprised him again. He looked old, exhausted, as if he had aged a decade in just a few hours. There was a champagne stain on his tie that he hadn't noticed, and his hair, usually perfectly combed, was disheveled from all the times he had run his hands through it during the night. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to regroup, trying to think clearly through the fog of panic and denial. There was a way out of this. There had to be. He was Derek Morrison. He had built a business from nothing. He had closed deals that other brokers said were impossible. He had transformed his personality into a recognizable and valuable brand. Except that brand was built on a lie, and now the foundation had cracked, and the entire structure was crumbling. Derek went back to the bedroom and picked up his phone again, this time opening his messages. There was one from a number he didn't recognize, sent at 2:13 a.m. "Saw you at the Four Seasons tonight. What a mess. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Melissa." The architect, the woman he had taken to events, who had posed with him for photos, who had been part of his elaborate charade. He started to type a reply, then stopped. What would he say? "Thanks for offering to comfort the man who used you as an accessory." He deleted the draft and moved to the next message. This one was from his mother, sent an hour ago. "Derek, I'm seeing terrible things online. Please call me. I don't understand what's happening. Are you married? Why didn't you tell us?" Derek closed his eyes, feeling a fresh wave of shame. His parents. He hadn't even thought about how this would affect them. They lived in a retirement community in Florida, happily disconnected from social media, but clearly someone had shown them. His mother loved Catherine, or at least had loved her the one time she met her 7 years ago, when Derek still thought that quiet wedding in Milwaukee was just the beginning of something bigger. He had promised his parents he would bring Catherine to visit, that they would have a proper ceremony eventually, that there were just some professional complications to sort out first. And then he had simply stopped mentioning her. And his parents, polite and trusting, had stopped asking, assuming the relationship had ended and Derek was moving on. Except he had never moved on. He had remained trapped in a limbo of his own creation, keeping Catherine in a sealed compartment of his life while living a public lie that had become more real to him than the truth. Derek went downstairs, unable to sit still, unable to lie down in the bed he had shared with Catherine only occasionally, when he was home early enough, when she was still in this house instead of in her secret West Loop loft. He wandered into the kitchen, opening cabinets, searching for something, though he didn't know what. There was a bottle of whiskey in the cabinet above the fridge, an expensive single malt someone had given him as a thank you gift for a closed deal. Derek grabbed a glass and poured himself 3 fingers, taking a gulp that burned his throat and settled in his stomach like liquid fire. The kitchen table held a stack of mail he hadn't noticed before. Derek sat down and began leafing through it, looking for distractions, anything to keep from thinking about the disaster his life had become. There were bills, department store catalogs addressed to Catherine, and an art magazine he didn't recognize. He opened the magazine, flipping through pages of photographs of galleries and artists, until he stopped at a double-page interview. The headline read, "Catherine Brennan, the quiet visionary transforming contemporary art." The photo showed Catherine in one of her galleries, surrounded by vibrant, abstract paintings. She was smiling, but not the soft, restrained smile Derek knew. This one was wider, more genuine, reaching her eyes and transforming her entire face. She looked happy, truly deeply happy, in a way Derek realized he had never seen at home. He read the interview, each word cutting deeper. Catherine spoke about her philosophy, about believing in artists when no one else would, about creating spaces where marginalized voices could be heard. She discussed the challenges of building a business in a male-dominated industry, about being underestimated and having to work twice as hard to prove her worth. And then, near the end, the interviewer asked about her personal life. Derek read Catherine's answer with growing horror. "I learned that you can't wait for other people to validate your existence. You have to validate yourself. Build your own platform. Create your own space in the world, even when the people closest to you fail to see you." The interview was 3 months old. Catherine had given these answers, had spoken of invisibility and self-validation, and Derek had been completely unaware. The magazine had probably arrived in the mail, and he had ignored it, just as he ignored everything that had to do with Catherine's work. Derek closed the magazine and finished his whiskey in a long gulp. The microwave clock read 3:17 in the morning. In less than 6 hours, he would have to face Gerald and the company's PR team, would have to try to salvage a career that might already be beyond saving. But sitting there in the silent kitchen, surrounded by the ghostly evidence of the life Catherine had built in the shadows of his neglect, Derek realized something fundamental. He didn't know if he wanted to save that career, that version of himself he had become. The man who valued appearances over substance, who treated relationships as transactions, who had traded something real and valuable for a glittering, hollow illusion. His phone vibrated one more time. Another notification, another piece of his reputation disintegrating in digital. Derek ignored it and poured more whiskey, watching the amber liquid fill the glass, knowing that morning would bring more consequences than he was ready to face, but unable to do anything but sit there in the dark, and finally, for the first time in 7 years, confront the full and terrible truth of what he had become. Derek woke to the insistent sound of the doorbell, followed by firm knocks on the front door. Morning light streamed through the open kitchen blinds, and he realized he had fallen asleep sitting at the table, head resting on his arms, the half-empty whiskey bottle beside him. His neck was stiff, his mouth dry as cotton, and there was a throbbing ache behind his eyes that promised to escalate into a full-blown migraine. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, more insistent. Derek checked the microwave clock and saw it was 8:42 in the morning. The meeting with Gerald was at 9. He had exactly 18 minutes to make himself presentable and get to the loop, a mathematical impossibility that made his stomach sink further. He stumbled to the front door, still half asleep, expecting to find a delivery person or perhaps a curious neighbor. Instead, he found Amanda Roche standing on his porch, holding 2 cups of coffee from an expensive artisan cafe and wearing an expression that blended professional concern with something uncomfortably close to pity. "You look terrible," she said without preamble, pushing one of the cups towards him. "And you missed the meeting. Gerald is furious." Derek accepted the coffee automatically, the steam rising and blurring his already bleary eyes. "What time is it?" "Almost 9. The meeting was at 8, Derek. 8, not 9. Amanda brushed past him to enter the house, her low-heeled boots clicking on the hardwood floor. "Gerald changed the time last night and sent an email. Didn't you see it?" Of course he hadn't seen it. Derek had ignored his phone for hours, leaving it on the bed while he drank whiskey and read about his neglected wife's empire. He closed the door and followed Amanda into the living room, where she had already settled on the sofa, crossing her legs and watching him with the clinical attention of a doctor examining a terminal patient. "How bad is it?" Derek asked, taking a sip of the coffee. It was strong and bitter, exactly what he needed. On a scale of 1 to 10, 12. Amanda didn't soften. It was one of the things Derek had always appreciated about her, her brutal honesty. Now, that quality felt less admirable and more like daggers. "We've lost 14 clients since last night. 14, Derek. That's approximately 4.2 million in commissions, and the numbers are still climbing." Derek sat in the armchair opposite her, holding the coffee cup like a lifeline. "Gerald wants to fire me." Gerald wants to do worse than that. He wants to completely erase you from the brand. Remove your name from all marketing materials. Reassign your remaining clients to other brokers. Basically pretend you never existed. Amanda paused, taking a sip of her own coffee. Which is ironic, considering what you did to your wife. The observation cut, but Derek couldn't argue. Is there any way to salvage this? Honestly, I don't know. Amanda placed her cup on the coffee table, carefully on one of the color-organized books Derek now realized Catherine had probably bought. Your problem isn't just professional, it's moral. People aren't just upset because you lied about being married. They're upset because you built an entire career on a fundamental fraud. You sold authenticity while living the most inauthentic lie possible. Derek wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to reframe his actions as something less damning, but every word Amanda said was true. He had sold more than properties. He had sold a lifestyle fantasy, an idealized version of single, successful masculinity that resonated with his clients because it felt genuine. Except none of it was genuine. Catherine is everywhere, Amanda continued, picking up her phone and swiping through the screen. Good Morning America wants to interview her. Ellen DeGeneres is trying to book her. There's a New York Times article about how she represents a new type of feminist entrepreneur, building power behind the scenes while men occupy the spotlight. She looked at Derek over the phone. Do you realize you accidentally turned your wife into a feminist icon? The absurdity of the situation would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. Derek had spent 7 years trying to keep Catherine invisible, and in a single night she had become one of the most visible women in America. And the more people loved her, the more they hated him for having hidden her. I need to talk to her, Derek said, more to himself than to Amanda. Why? So you can do what exactly? Amanda leaned forward, her voice sharpening. Derek, you need to understand something fundamental. This isn't about you and Catherine anymore. This is about you and the consequences of your choices. Catherine has moved on. She's built an entire life without you. The question now is, what are you going to do? The question hung in the air between them. Derek didn't have an answer, at least not one that made sense. All his usual strategies, his rehearsed charm, his ability to spin narratives in his favor, everything seemed useless in the face of the raw reality of what he had done. His phone began to ring upstairs, the sound muffled but persistent. Amanda raised an eyebrow. You should answer that. It might be important. Derek walked upstairs slowly, each step sending waves of pain through his aching head. He found the phone on the bed, vibrating with a call from Gerald Hastings. Derek considered ignoring it, but knew it would only postpone the inevitable. He answered. Where the hell have you been? Gerald's voice thundered through the speaker. I moved the meeting to 8. 8, Derek. Can't you even show up for your own execution? Gerald, I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want solutions. But guess what? There are no solutions for this. Derek heard papers rustling, Gerald's office chair creaking. I've talked to our lawyers. We are terminating your contract, effective immediately. You have until the end of the day to clear your desk and return your company materials. The finality of the words hit Derek like a physical blow. Gerald, please. I built my entire career at this company. I worked for 10 years. You lied for 10 years, Gerald corrected coldly. To me, to our clients, to everyone. And now it's costing the firm millions in damaged reputation. We have clients questioning if they can trust any of our brokers if we hire people like you. People like me? Derek felt anger rising through the panic. You were the one who told me to keep my marriage a secret. You said single men sell better. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Gerald spoke again, his voice was lower, more dangerous. I suggested you keep your personal life private. I never, ever told you to lie about having a wife. That was your choice, Derek. Your decision. And now, you're going to have to live with the consequences. The call died. Derek stood holding the phone, staring at the black screen, feeling the last pieces of his professional life disintegrate. 10 years, a decade of hard work, late nights, sacrificed weekends. all vanishing in less than 24 hours. He went downstairs to find Amanda still waiting, but now she was standing, clearly preparing to leave. "By your expression, I assume it wasn't good news." "I'm fired." The words came out flat, emotionless, as if they belonged to someone else. Amanda nodded, unsurprised. "I'm sorry, Derek, genuinely." She hesitated, then added, "You know, a few years ago when I first started working with you, I thought I'd found a mentor, someone who had figured out how to balance professional success with personal integrity." She gave a sad smile. "I guess I was wrong about the second part." After Amanda left, Derek was alone in the silent house again. He wandered through the rooms, truly observing them for the first time in years. The dining room they never used, the table always set with a fresh flower arrangement that someone, presumably Catherine, must have changed weekly. The pantry he rarely opened, now discovering it was filled with sophisticated cooking ingredients, spices he didn't recognize, evidence of meals Catherine prepared for herself when he was working late or pretending to work late while attending social events without her. He ended up in the basement, walking down the stairs that creaked softly beneath his feet. Catherine's office was here, and Derek realized he hadn't entered this space in over a year, maybe 2, long enough to completely forget what it was like. The door was unlocked. Derek pushed it open and stepped into a world he didn't recognize. The basement had been transformed into a complete professional office. There was a huge desk with 2 computer monitors, files organized on custom shelves, paintings on the walls, showcasing artists Catherine represented. There was a small seating area with a sofa and a coffee table, where she presumably met with clients or artists. But what truly stopped Derek was the opposite wall, covered with a massive corkboard. And on that board was the visual proof of the empire Catherine had built. There were photos of gallery openings, newspaper clippings about successful exhibitions, signed contracts, framed checks from significant sales. In the center was a map of the United States, with pins marking each location of her 23 galleries. Derek approached the board, his eyes scanning the markers. Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver, Austin, New Orleans, Miami, Atlanta, Charlotte, Philadelphia, Boston, New York. And those were just the largest ones. There were more scattered across smaller cities, each representing a gamble Catherine had taken, an artist she had believed in, a risk that had paid off. In one corner of the board was a section labeled Year 1. Derek studied the faded photos and yellowed documents. There was a picture of Catherine, looking absurdly young, in front of a small gallery in Milwaukee. The sign read, Galleria Voz, Voice Gallery, and Catherine was smiling nervously at the camera, holding a large, old-fashioned key. The date in the corner was 7 years ago, just 2 months after their wedding. She had started immediately. While Derek was focused on building his brand as a single, sophisticated broker, Catherine was here, in this basement, building something infinitely more substantial. And he had never bothered to go downstairs to see. There was a cardboard box under the desk. Derek pulled it out and opened it, finding more documents, more evidence of Catherine's parallel life. But at the bottom was something different, a photo album. Derek took it out and opened it, feeling something clench in his chest. They were photos of their wedding. Not just the few official courthouse pictures, but dozens of others he had completely forgotten. Catherine had brought a disposable camera and apparently had asked strangers to take pictures of them around Milwaukee that day. There was a photo of them eating ice cream by the lake, another of Derek putting a flower in her hair in a park, a blurred selfie of the 2 of them laughing in a taxi. They looked so happy. So stupidly, naively happy. Derek traced Catherine's face in one of the photos, remembering how she had glowed that day, how every small moment had felt magical. He had loved her then. Truly, deeply loved her. When had that changed? When had love turned into convenience, and convenience into neglect, and neglect into active erasure? Derek closed the album and held it against his chest, feeling something break inside him. It wasn't just his career that was destroyed. It wasn't just his reputation. It was something infinitely more valuable. Something he could never get back. The trust of a woman who had believed in him, who had built an empire while waiting for him to fulfill his promise that this was just temporary. Except Derek never had any intention of keeping that promise, did he? He knew it now, sitting in his wife's secret office, surrounded by evidence of everything he had ignored. The truth was, he had liked the arrangement, liked having Catherine at home when he needed her, but invisible when her presence would compromise the image he was selling. He had found an arrangement that worked perfectly for him, and he had never bothered to ask if it worked for her. His phone vibrated in his pocket. More notifications, more evidence of his world crumbling. But this time, Derek didn't check. He simply sat on the cold basement floor, holding a photo album from a day that seemed to belong to a different life, and finally allowed the full weight of his choices to completely crush him. The sun was already high when Derek finally emerged from the basement, the photo album still in his hands. The house felt different now, as if every room was whispering secrets he had been too deaf to hear all these years. He carefully placed the album on the kitchen table and picked up his phone, ignoring the hundreds of notifications that kept pouring in. There was only one person he needed to talk to. The call went straight to Catherine's voicemail. Derek waited for the beep and then began to speak, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "Catherine, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, and I understand, but I need you to know that I finally went into your office. I saw everything you built, and I'm so sorry. For everything. For every day I didn't pay attention. For every time I pretended your work didn't matter. For turning our marriage into something shameful when it should have been my greatest honor." He paused, feeling the words gather in his throat. "I'm not calling to ask for a second chance. I know I don't deserve one. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. I finally see who you always were. And I'm sorry it took me so long." Derek hung up and stood in the silent kitchen, feeling something akin to relief mixed with deep sadness. Saying these words changed nothing. But at least he had said them. At least Catherine would know he finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost. His phone rang almost immediately. For a moment of irrational hope, Derek thought it might be Catherine returning his call. But it was an unknown number. He answered hesitantly. "Mr. Morrison, this is Rachel Chen from Chicago Magazine. I'm writing a story about last night's events, and I'd like to include your perspective." Derek closed his eyes. Another journalist wanting to dissect his public humiliation. No comment. "I understand your reluctance, but let me ask you a question first." Rachel's voice was professional, but not hostile. "What would you like people to know about Catherine Brennan? Not about you, about her. You were married to her for 7 years. Surely you must have something to say about who she truly is." The question caught him off guard. It wasn't about his scandal or his excuses. It was about Catherine. Derek thought carefully before responding. "She is the most determined person I have ever known. When Catherine believes in something, she doesn't just support it. She transforms it. She sees potential where others see risks. And she has this ability to make the people around her feel like they are capable of more than they imagined." He paused, realizing he was speaking in the present tense, as if he still knew this woman, when clearly he had never truly known her. "She built everything herself. Every gallery, every contract, every relationship. And she did it while I was too busy with my own importance to notice." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "May I quote that?" "You may. But make it clear that I'm not trying to redeem myself. There's no redemption for what I did. I just want people to know that Catherine Brennan isn't just a story of revenge or an accidental feminist icon. She is a visionary who succeeded despite having a husband who didn't deserve her." After hanging up, Derek sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop for the first time since the previous night. His inbox was exploding with emails, mostly client cancellations or company notifications about the termination of his contract. But amidst the digital chaos, there was an email from Catherine, sent at 6 in the morning. The subject line simply read, "Practical Matters." Derek opened it with trembling hands. The email was direct, emotionless, purely functional. Catherine explained that her lawyer would be in touch next week to begin divorce proceedings. She listed the items she would come to retrieve from the Evanston house, mainly personal belongings and some art pieces she had purchased. She asked for nothing more than what was hers. No division of assets or alimony. It was as if she were simply closing a bank account, clearing the last traces of a finished transaction. At the end of the email, there was a single paragraph that stood out from the clinical tone of the rest. "I didn't do this to destroy you, Derek. I did this to free myself. The difference is important. I hope one day you understand that." Derek read those words repeatedly, letting them penetrate through the layers of self-pity and shame. Catherine wasn't a villain in his story. She was simply the hero of her own story, a story in which he had played the role of an obstacle to be overcome. The following days passed in a strange haze. Derek cleared his desk at the office under the curious gazes of colleagues who had once envied him. He ignored calls from former clients who wanted explanations or, worse, to share their disappointments. He stopped checking social media completely, unable to bear the constant dissection of his mistakes. Catherine, meanwhile, was everywhere. Derek saw her on the news when he passed by televisions in coffee shops, or heard about her in strangers' conversations on the subway. She had appeared on 3 national morning shows, each interview solidifying her status as a symbol of female strength and self-determination. And in every interview, when asked about Derek, she was gracious, saying only that she hoped he would find peace and authenticity in his own life. That generosity cut deeper than any accusation could. A week after the night that had changed everything, Derek was packing up his belongings at the office when his phone rang. It was a Milwaukee area code number he didn't recognize. He considered ignoring it, but something made him answer. "Derek, it's me, Diana, the silver-haired woman from the GALA, Catherine's friend. Don't hang up, please. Catherine doesn't know I'm calling." Derek pressed the phone to his ear, his heart quickening. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. Better than fine, actually. But there's something you should know." Diana paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "Catherine is opening a new gallery here in Milwaukee, on the same street where the first one failed 7 years ago. It's a full circle for her. The opening is in 2 weeks. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, I saw you two that first year. I was one of the artists in her original gallery, when Catherine was still figuring out who she was. And you used to visit her sometimes, remember? You'd look at her as if she was the most extraordinary thing you'd ever seen." Diana sighed. "I'm not saying you deserve forgiveness or a second chance, but I think you deserve the opportunity to say goodbye properly, to close things in a way that honors who she is, not who you pretended she was." Derek couldn't speak for a long moment. Finally, his voice came out hoarse. "Would she be okay with that? With me showing up? Honestly, I don't know. But Catherine is too kind for her own good sometimes. She probably wouldn't say no if you showed up. The question is, are you brave enough to go?" After Diana hung up, Derek stood in his now empty office, looking out the window at the city that had been his kingdom and now seemed like foreign territory. He thought about courage, about how he had thought he was brave building a real estate empire, closing tough deals, dominating a competitive market. But true courage, he realized now, was Catherine building her galleries while carrying the weight of being invisible. It was her stepping onto that stage knowing it would change everything. It was her being gracious in interviews when she had every right to be bitter. Derek didn't know if he had that kind of courage, but for the first time in his life, he wanted to find out. 2 weeks later, Derek drove to Milwaukee on a sunny autumn Saturday. The city was different from how he remembered it, more vibrant, more alive. Or perhaps it was he who was different, seeing things with eyes that had finally learned to pay attention. He found the gallery easily. It was in a restored brick building in an artsy neighborhood that was clearly undergoing renovation. There was a line at the door, people waiting to enter the opening. Derek recognized some of the faces from Chicago art events, critics and collectors Catherine had won over throughout the years. He stood across the street, watching through the display window. Catherine was inside, wearing an emerald green dress he had never seen, talking animatedly with a group of people. She laughed at something someone said, that genuine laugh Derek had seen at the Four Seasons, and he felt that nostalgia again, but this time mixed with something different. Pride, perhaps. Or simply the recognition that he was witnessing something extraordinary. Derek didn't cross the street. He didn't enter the gallery, because he realized, standing there watching the woman who had been his wife shine in her own space, that Diana had been wrong about one thing. He didn't need to say goodbye. Catherine had already said goodbye to him weeks ago at the Four Seasons, when she finally stopped waiting for him to become who she needed him to be. What Derek needed to do was say hello to himself. To the version of himself that had been buried under layers of pretense and fear. The man who had knelt in a coffee shop and promised to love someone truly, not just when it was convenient. He took one last mental picture of Catherine in her element, surrounded by art and people who valued her, and then turned and walked back to his car. Not with defeat, but with something that suspiciously felt like acceptance. On the drive back to Chicago, Derek stopped at an overlook with a view of Lake Michigan. He stood there for a long time, watching the waves, thinking about fresh starts and how sometimes the only way to move forward is to honestly admit where you went wrong. Not to gain forgiveness or redemption, but simply to stop carrying the burden of pretending your choices had no consequences. He didn't know what he would do next. His career was destroyed. His reputation was in tatters. But for the first time in 7 years, Derek Morrison wasn't hiding anything from anyone. And in that space of brutal, uncomfortable honesty, he found something he didn't expect. The possibility of becoming someone real,